Did you know that every 3 seconds, someone in the world develops dementia? It's a brutal number, but beyond the statistics, there's a mother who starts forgetting her daughter's name, a grandfather who gets lost on his way home, and a mind that fades away little by little. What's even more disturbing, and what brings me here today with a sense of urgency that won't let me sleep, is that some of these tragedies could have been prevented. A new scientific review has placed several everyday medications under scrutiny, drugs that we use with total normality, even with trust. These are medications that you might have right now in your medicine cabinet, prescribed by well-intentioned doctors, but whose hidden effects on the brain are becoming increasingly clear and alarming. If you're over 60, if you care for your parents, or if you simply want to protect your mental clarity in the years ahead, I ask you to stay. Because one of these drugs, sold as the solution to a simple discomfort, could actually be silently accelerating the decline of your memory, reasoning, recognition, and independence. I'm Dr. Sanchez, and after more than 2 decades dedicated to senior medicine, I've seen how one timely conversation can change the fate of an entire family. Today, I'm not here to share theories. I'm here with data, published studies, and an uncomfortable truth that still hasn't reached many medical consultations. I'm going to reveal the 4 groups of medications most strongly linked to dementia risk in older adults, and most importantly, what safer alternatives you can discuss with your doctor. The last one on the list is the most common and the most terrifying. Stay with me because understanding this isn't just power. In this case, it's mental freedom. It's dignity. But before we go deeper, let me explain what dementia really is, because only by understanding the enemy can we truly defend ourselves. Imagine your brain as a vast library with millions of books. Every memory, every word, every emotion is precisely stored there. In dementia, the librarians, your neurons, begin to disappear. First, you lose the notes of the day, then names, faces, the ability to follow a conversation, to cook, to find your way around. It doesn't happen suddenly. It's a silent decline, sometimes so subtle we confuse it with normal aging. But by the time you notice, it's often too late. The terrible truth is that this process, which we assume is inevitable, can actually be accelerated by common medications, drugs that slowly dim the lights of that mental library without anyone realizing. So let's open that medicine cabinet and face, with courage, what we've been taking. Section 1. The silent enemy that sleeps on the nightstand. Medications for sleep and chronic anxiety, known as benzodiazepines. If there's one class of drugs that symbolizes blind trust in modern medicine, it's these: lorazepam, diazepam, alprazolam, clonazepam. Names that sound familiar, even comforting to many people. The little pill that helps you sleep, eases the tightness in your chest, calms your nerves. But what's prescribed as temporary relief often turns into chronic dependence, and that continuous use, even in low doses, can come at a very high price for your brain. A price paid with the loss of what defines us most: memory, judgment, and identity. Benzodiazepines act on the GABA system, a neurotransmitter that slows down brain activity. It's like dimming the lights in a room full of stimuli. That's why they help you relax, sleep, and calm down. But their effect isn't selective. They don't just soothe anxiety, they also slow key cognitive functions like attention, the formation of new memories, and learning retention. And when used for long periods, these effects build up. Studies are clear. Older adults who use benzodiazepines chronically have a significantly higher risk of developing dementia. Some studies suggest the risk can rise by up to 50%, and the longer the use, the stronger the link. This isn't just a vague suspicion, it's a consistent pattern across multiple investigations. In addition, benzodiazepines disrupt sleep cycles. Although they make you sleep, they suppress deep sleep, the phase when the brain clears toxins, strengthens memory, and repairs connections. Sleeping under benzodiazepines is like spending the night in a room with the lights on. You rest, but not truly. Over time, this lack of restorative sleep contributes to cognitive decline. And that's not all. These pills also increase the risk of falls. And what happens when an older person falls? Fractures, hospitalization, and a high risk of delirium, a sudden mental confusion that can leave permanent damage and lead one step closer to dementia. Let me tell you about Ramiro, a 74-year-old widower living alone. He had suffered from insomnia since his wife's death. His doctor prescribed lorazepam. At first, it was a blessing. He could sleep and felt like he could carry on, but no one told him it should only be a short-term treatment. Months passed, then years. Ramiro became more apathetic. He started forgetting basic things. Once, he even got lost on his way to the market. His daughter thought it was Alzheimer's. But when the doctor reviewed his history, the connection was immediate. Ramiro had been taking a benzodiazepine every night for 3 years. The medication that once brought him comfort was also erasing his ability to live independently. So what can we do? Should we just accept anxiety and insomnia as inevitable? No. The solution isn't to suffer, but to understand that there are other ways. First, and I'll say this in every section, never stop a medication suddenly without consulting your doctor. Benzodiazepines cause physical dependence, and quitting abruptly can trigger severe anxiety, extreme insomnia, or even seizures. Withdrawal must be gradual and supervised. The key is a serious conversation with your doctor. Is it absolutely necessary for me to stay on this medication? Can we create a plan to stop it? Yes. There are safer options for insomnia. Cognitive behavioral therapy has proven more effective long-term than pills. You can also use melatonin, practice good sleep hygiene, relaxation, and guided meditation. For anxiety, newer antidepressants have safer cognitive profiles, and there are non-drug tools, physical activity, social connection, and emotional therapy. The goal isn't perfect sleep or zero anxiety. It's to protect your mind and preserve your memories. That's worth more than any artificial rest. We've already exposed the first culprit, one that hides behind comfort but weakens the mind you want to protect. Now let's talk about another insidious group of drugs. They make no noise, yet appear in dozens of products that millions of older adults take daily, unaware of the price, cognitive decline, and dementia. Did you know that common antihistamines, incontinence pills, motion sickness drugs, and some antidepressants all share a toxic effect on the brain? They block acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter vital for attention, learning, and memory. Without it, neurons lose their ability to communicate. These anticholinergic drugs, like oxybutynin, tolterodine, diphenhydramine, or amitriptyline, disrupt that communication year after year. The evidence is solid. A meta-analysis of over 300,000 people found that those taking drugs with a high anticholinergic load had up to a 70% higher risk of developing dementia. Worse, the effects may persist even after stopping the medication, like smoke staining the walls of your mind. Take Teresa, 76. She had urinary leakage and was prescribed oxybutynin. It worked. She regained confidence. But months later, she began repeating stories and confusing days. One night, she didn't recognize her own home. The diagnosis? Moderate cognitive impairment, likely linked to her medication. The same pill that gave her freedom was stealing her clarity. You don't have to live with incontinence or untreated allergies, but you deserve safer options. Check your medications online or ask your doctor or pharmacist if they have anticholinergic effects. Then, discuss alternatives. Doctor, this drug has an anticholinergic effect. Are there safer options for my memory? For overactive bladder, for instance, beta-3 agonists like mirabegron work differently and don't interfere with acetylcholine. They're much safer. There are also non-drug options like pelvic floor exercises, bladder retraining, and cutting caffeine or alcohol. For sleep, instead of sedating antihistamines, try melatonin or behavioral methods. The message is clear. Not everything that helps the body respects the brain. And when it comes to memory, autonomy, and dignity, the invisible cost can be devastating. We've already uncovered 2 culprits, one that steals real rest and another that silences thought itself. But what comes next is even more striking. A group of drugs often seen as miraculous. If you've ever had an asthma flare, severe arthritis, or an allergic reaction, you've likely experienced their near-instant relief. I'm talking about systemic corticosteroids like prednisone, methylprednisolone, and dexamethasone. Powerful drugs that extinguish inflammation in hours, but not without a price. But that effectiveness comes with a dark side. And in the brain of an older adult, that side can be devastating. Yes, corticosteroids save lives, but they can also disrupt the brain's chemical and structural balance, increasing the risk of cognitive decline and dementia, especially when used for long periods or in high doses. The danger comes from two fronts: the direct biological effects on brain tissue and the indirect consequences that disturb multiple body systems and, in turn, affect how the brain functions. Let's start with the direct damage. Corticosteroids affect the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory. Excess cortisol, whether naturally produced or induced by drugs like prednisone, has a toxic effect on hippocampal neurons. This isn't a metaphor. Studies using brain imaging have shown measurable reductions in hippocampal volume and loss of synaptic connections. The very area that forms new memories literally shrinks. Now for the indirect consequences. First, corticosteroids disrupt metabolism and raise blood sugar, often leading to or worsening diabetes. One of the biggest accelerators of cognitive decline, even in people without previous history. High glucose levels damage brain blood vessels, cause microinfarcts, and trigger inflammation that harms brain tissue. Second, they interfere with sleep. Many older adults who take corticosteroids in the morning suffer from insomnia at night. Chronic lack of sleep prevents the brain from performing its nightly cleansing, eliminating toxins, consolidating memories, and repairing connections. It's like a city that never collects its garbage. Third, they alter mood and perception, causing euphoria, irritability, anxiety, and confusion. In older adults, these symptoms can easily be mistaken for dementia, or worse, trigger it in already vulnerable brains. Take Clara, 78. She lived with rheumatoid arthritis, and her doctor prescribed long-term prednisone. The inflammation subsided, her pain improved, but months later, she began having moments of disorientation. She missed appointments, mixed up her grandchildren's names, and alternated between insomnia and unexplained crying. The diagnosis came: mild cognitive impairment. The cause was likely multifactorial, but corticosteroids were the clearest trigger. Her brain simply couldn't handle the daily chemical stress. So what can we do when a medication is necessary? The answer, as in all of medicine, is rarely black or white. Prednisone isn't the enemy. Chronic unmonitored use is. The keys are simple. Use the lowest possible dose for the shortest possible time. Ask your doctor, can we begin lowering the dose? Is there a tapering plan? Explore alternatives. For autoimmune diseases, there are disease-modifying therapies that may reduce or eliminate the need for corticosteroids. For asthma or COPD, inhaled corticosteroids are much safer. If you must continue using them, protect your brain actively. Keep your blood sugar stable with a diet free of ultra-processed foods. Manage stress through mindful breathing. Prioritize quality sleep, even if that means adjusting your schedule or adding melatonin. Most importantly, monitor your cognitive health every few months. Early detection can make all the difference. Remember, corticosteroids are powerful allies, but without control, they can become silent saboteurs. And when what's at stake is your memory, your independence, your ability to recognize your loved ones, isn't that worth a deeper conversation with your doctor? We've now uncovered 3 groups of medications that promise relief but can quietly become architects of mental fog. And the next one is the most controversial, the most common in nursing homes, and in my experience the fastest to accelerate dementia. The pill that steals willpower. Antipsychotics in older adults. This is without a doubt the hardest chapter, because it touches on a widespread, almost normalized practice in elder care. One born often out of exhaustion, fear, or lack of resources, yet with devastating consequences. I'm talking about the use of antipsychotics like risperidone, quetiapine, olanzapine, or even haloperidol in older adults with behavioral issues or dementia. These drugs were originally developed to treat severe psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. In those contexts, and used correctly, they can save lives. But in older adults, especially those with dementia, their off-label use has become a quick and dangerous shortcut. A pill to calm them, to make them manageable, but that calm comes at a terrible cost, often the mind itself, or even life. Major health agencies, including the FDA, have issued their strongest warning, the black box warning, against using antipsychotics in dementia patients. Why? Because they significantly increase the risk of death, in some cases doubling or even tripling the risk of accelerated dementia, falls, and other fatal complications. Infections, and yes, even fatal cerebrovascular episodes. But today we're not talking about strokes. We're going to take a closer look at how these medications disconnect patients from the world, how they dull emotions, reduce movement, and most importantly, visibly and measurably accelerate cognitive decline. So, how do they do it? First, they alter dopamine. Dopamine isn't just the molecule of pleasure. It's essential for motivation, attention, fine movement, and initiative. When it's blocked, the brain falls into a state of functional apathy. The patient stops talking, stops moving, stops making eye contact. They may seem calmer, but in reality, they're less conscious. Second, they cause extrapyramidal symptoms, rigidity, tremors, and slow movements. All of this limits mobility, and for an older person, that often means becoming bedridden. And being bedridden leads to isolation, and isolation is pure poison for the brain. Third, they affect metabolism. These drugs increase the risk of diabetes, high cholesterol, and abdominal obesity. And as we've already seen, all these factors are deeply linked to cognitive decline. And fourth, and most serious, they disturb circadian rhythms, perception of the environment, and emotional regulation. All this can trigger an acute confusional syndrome or delirium, which often leaves permanent cognitive damage. A crisis that begins with a small dose of risperidone can end with an irreversible diagnosis of advanced dementia. Let me introduce you to Tomas, 82 years old. He lived in a care home with dementia. Some days were difficult. He would get agitated, asking for his late wife. The overwhelmed staff decided to start him on a small dose of quetiapine. At first it seemed to work. Tomas was quieter, calmer. But soon, he stopped smiling, stopped recognizing his daughter. Within a month, he went from walking the hallway to being unable to get out of bed. And within 3, his decline was so severe that he was considered end of life. The pill that calmed the situation had erased the essence of who he was. So what can we do? This is the hardest conversation, but also the most urgent. If you have an elderly family member with dementia who's been prescribed an antipsychotic, you must be their advocate. Ask directly, "Doctor, have we tried all the non-drug approaches? What's the plan to stop this medication as soon as possible?" Because alternatives exist. And the most effective of all is understanding why the person is agitated or confused. Are they in physical pain that hasn't been detected? Are there noises, lights, or stimuli they can't make sense of? Are they bored, scared, or lonely? Agitation in dementia isn't a symptom to silence. It's a message to interpret. There are proven behavioral interventions: personalized music, calm environments, emotional validation, gentle physical contact, and structured routines. Yes, they take time, effort, and patience, but they are infinitely safer and above all more humane. Antipsychotics should be the last resort for the shortest possible time, and always with a clear withdrawal plan. Never a permanent solution, never a shortcut to silence. Because behind every pill that works is a mind that's fading and a family slowly losing the person who's still there. We've traveled a difficult road, I know. We've opened that medicine cabinet we often trust, and we've exposed 4 major culprits of silent cognitive decline. Benzodiazepines, those pills for sleep or anxiety that slowly dim the spark of thought. Hidden anticholinergics, found in bladder and allergy medications that disrupt the brain's internal communication, like unplugging its electrical system. Systemic corticosteroids that ease inflammation but, when used without strategy, erode the hippocampus and emotional balance. And finally, antipsychotics, the quick fix for behavioral issues in dementia that often becomes nothing more than a shortcut to total disconnection. I'm not telling you this to make you afraid. I'm telling you so you can take control. We live in a healthcare system that often rushes, prescribing what's quick, what works, without asking too many questions. But you are not a passive patient. You are the guardian of your mind, or the mind of your parents, your grandparents, those who can no longer speak for themselves. And now you have something many don't: information, awareness, and power. With that, you can have a different kind of conversation with your doctor, not one driven by fear, but by clarity. Not out of complaint, but from the right to be heard. Review your medications, make a list, and ask questions. You don't need a medical degree to say, "Doctor, Could this medication affect my memory? Is there a safer option? And if you're caring for someone with dementia, that question becomes a moral responsibility. Because you can speak, you can decide. You can prevent that person from fading faster than they should. If this message has been helpful to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your sister who cares for your mom, with that friend who's been taking sleeping pills for years, with your group at the day center. Every time someone hears this information, it can change the course of a life. And I'll ask one last thing. Share your experience in the comments. Have you taken any of these medications? Have you seen how they affect someone close to you? Your words don't just help others, they remind us that we're not alone. Because there are many of us willing to fight for an old age that's more dignified, more lucid, more human. Take care of your mind. It's the home where everything you love lives. And you deserve to keep it illuminated until the very end.